Hi everyone, we're live again talking with Erjan, Paul Rolfe, and Silas J. Lees. And today's topic is the disconnect between estate agents and solicitors. What creates this disconnect as we're working together on common projects? What does this actually mean for estate agents, solicitors, and then the buyers and sellers at the other end? And then what can be done? Because at the end of the day, we're both working together, and our business is being successful actually depends on us working together
as a team.
As a team.
Yeah.
Almost like a team, as much as a team like as we can be.
Just understanding, really, I think.
Erjan, Paul, Silas. Erjan, would you like to give us an introduction, and then Paul, and then Silas, and then let's get started?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me on today as well. It's a pleasure to speak to fellow-minded professionals as well that are looking to solve the biggest problem in conveyancing at the moment, which is why it takes so long and it's so stressful, and it doesn't need to be. And hopefully with some discussion and words of wisdom, we can actually put that right. But obviously, without curing the world problems, we've got to start somewhere effectively. I think for me, what's important is to identify the areas of that disconnect that you mentioned in terms of why this perception appears to be evident, even though it's sort of an unspoken thing. It's never really publicised or goes into detail. But essentially, for me, there are three key areas. One is the objective of the two parties involved, or all parties involved. The second is accountability of who's involved and why there are maybe slightly disproportionate areas of accountability. And finally, communication of how the parties interact and communicate with each other during the transaction, which will often lead to either a successful and efficient completion of the transaction or not. So in terms of the objective, I've always found that there is a common objective because we both want to get the deal done. The clients are obviously keen as mustard to get the deal done. Yeah. And obviously agents have spent a lot of time tying up the deal, securing the transaction, the arrangement between all the parties and negotiating, and finally getting to the point where they're ready to do business with each other. And what they need is lawyers that are obviously going to be able to undertake the conveyancing. And that then leads to the sort of frenzy of where the work goes, who it goes to, and a whole bartering of services by the lawyers to try and win that instruction from the agent if it is out in the open to bid for. Otherwise, there are other models that basically mean that the work gets referred through to a panel of law firms, which is usually another way it can work as well. So I think, unfortunately, for me, that's the common objective then sort of stops unless you've got a really good established relationship with people and you're used to working with them and you know what to expect. But if you're going into the unknown, as a lot of people do, then there's a more chance of there being a disconnect in terms of the objective, because the agents will be used to working a certain way with certain people, and lawyers will be used to working a certain way with certain agents. The frequency of their updates and things like that. So, I mean, from your perspective, Paul, how do you find that there is as black and white as that, or do you feel that there are other elements to that?
Okay, my name's Paul Rolfe, and we're an agency in central Scotland with branches in Stirling and Linlithgow. And I've been an agent for about 20 years up here. And we have a slightly different system in Scotland. People think it's completely different, but in reality, it's very, very similar, actually. Just some different words are used. So you talk about exchange of contracts in England. We talk about concluding of a missive, which is a Gaelic word for a contract. But actually, it's the same thing. Until that contract is signed or concluded, no deal actually is confirmed. The reality is that life up here is simpler, and there is not the need for all the kind of issues that seem to be occurring in England and Wales. The people here just get on with it, it's simple as that. Everyone wants to get paid, and lawyers take the instruction. We have an offer, and run with it. And our involvement with the process is very limited. Literally, probably a day before the completion of the sale, we get a phone call saying it's going to complete tomorrow, and please have the keys ready.
Wow.
It is as simple as that, and there's almost no communication. That's not completely true, but that is the majority of the cases.
No,
Simply, the lawyer gets on with it, and lawyer to lawyer speak frequently-ish. Everything happens in 6 to 8 weeks.
6 to 8 weeks.
So we have. I noticed that many agents in England have people employed as called progressors, sales progressors, and their job is to fring and harass lawyers to make sure that the deal happens. It's also about checking with the clients, everything's happy. It just doesn't exist in Scotland. That person, that job role is just a non-entity. There's no such thing. It's that simple.
So, Silas, you were an estate agent for a long time as well. So, sorry to interrupt, Paul, but just
No, it's okay.
You're in England, and Paul's in Scotland, and it sounds like heaven in Scotland, doesn't it?
Sounds like it.
And you know what the bizarre part is? So I'm Silas from a company called WiggyWam. We've tasked ourselves with bringing conveyancing back down to 6 weeks rather than the current sort of 16 weeks that it is right now in the UK. But the weird thing was, when I first started in agency in the sort of mid to late 90s, it was 6 to 8 weeks to exchange contracts from an offer. And that was before email and really before portals and before all of this sort of plethora of communication, WhatsApp, text message, smartphones. And so as time has gone on, whilst most other industries have become more efficient, there has been this elongation of the process, which actually doesn't need to happen. As Jan said right at the very start, it doesn't need to happen, but there's a lot of complexities and there is a lot of disconnect. So one of the questions I would ask is, you know, if I was to speak to 100 estate agents about what does a conveyancing solicitor actually do, most of them, with respect, can't really tell you what they do. And it was certainly the case when I was learning. Nobody really knew. It was like, well, they've got to do all the paperwork, and then they get to exchange of contracts, and then they complete. And okay, great. So that sounds really easy. Then let's get on the phone. Have you exchanged contracts yet? Well, no, we haven't. We're waiting for the client to fill out the the fixtures and fittings form or whatever it was. So give you the TA6 or the TA10 reference, right? And you go, oh, so you need the TA6, right? Okay, I'll go and chase that up, right? And you're bouncing about trying to solve these problems when you don't actually know what's actually going on behind the scenes. And that's partly the estate agent's fault, and it's partly the conveyancer's fault, because there is not this transparency that says, do you know what? Here's a checklist that 80 to 90% of all deals fall into. And that, you know, would be really useful for at least getting the information exchange going well between the estate agent, the client, and the conveyancer, in my humble opinion.
Just one quick,
so,
sorry.
I was just going to say that that's certainly one of the disconnects that I see, and it comes back to what we bang the drum about a lot, which is education, education, education. The client doesn't care really what has to go on behind the scenes, because all they want to do is pick up the keys to their new home.
Yes.
And they want to get moved, and they know that until they get to completion, that can't happen, but they don't know what they need to do to get there. And if you tell the client, you know, this is the transparency of the process, this is what we need to go through to get you there, you're setting, as Erjan would say, the client's expectation, and the client can go, oh, okay, so we've got to go through these steps to get there, and I can work with you and we can speed up the process. Yeah, absolutely, we can do that. All right, fine. So it's a totally different way of framing it, other than the solicitor's instructed and now I'm going to badger them every week. Where are we? Where are we? Have you exchanged? Have you exchanged? Well, no, because
this needs doing.
This and this.
Yeah, exactly. You know, that's where I see one of the dangerous disconnects.
I'm quite curious, if you don't mind. Is it not our government's fault for always introducing more legislation into all these things as well? Does that not help? Because I was thinking, you were saying in the 1990s it took between 6 and 8 weeks to go through this process. Now it takes between 16 and 18. If you've not got the right process in place, it's not that it can't, it's to say that it is because of. Is that anything to do with any of this at all? Or is it just, what do you think, Erjan? What do you think? Is that...
I don't think it's as simple as a fix as that, unfortunately, because I don't think this is a legislative issue. It's a perception issue.
Okay.
Perception.
How because so? I think. Sorry.
How so? How so?
Well, I think the whole thing about the relationship is kind of very fractured at the moment, in terms of, you know, as Silas has said, you know, the agents have all the best intentions in the world to get the deal done, because like we said at the outset, there is a common objective here. Everyone wants to get this deal done. And unfortunately, because of that lack of education, lack of awareness and appreciation of what's actually involved in the work, there becomes this sort of stigma of, well, you're just the agent, or you're the lawyer, you're overcomplicating it. So either way, neither is actually starting at the right point. Either, you know, and the agents will look at the lawyers and say, oh, they're charging this, and, you know, they're taking their time, and, you know, they slow it all down, and we just want to get paid. They'll never say, we just want to get paid. They'll say, you know, they're stopping you moving into the home, and, you know, I know you want to get this done, and your circumstances are really desperate, and et cetera, whatever it takes, because they want to try and get the client on board to actually say, look, you just have to hound your lawyer until they do it. And unfortunately, you know, as Paul said, I don't know if this was meant in a sort of generic gesture, but the word he used was harass.
Yes.
And that's exactly the perception that the lawyers have that agents do to the lawyers.
That's horrible.
You know, so the lawyers actually feel that the agents are just a harassing pain that just won't go away, and all they want is exchange, and they think it's really easy, and they don't understand why, and all the rest of it. So then I sort of think, hang on a second, let's just stop here for a sec. Why does the agent have that perception, firstly? And secondly, what are you doing as the practitioner to actually rectify that? Because it's a bit like being moaned at all the time, without any justification for being moaned at. And it's only so much you can tolerate before you're like, you know what, just go away, leave me alone. I don't tell you how to do your job, don't tell me how to do my job. Okay? And that's—
Can I interject here?
Yeah.
Can I interject here and say, you hit the nail on the head, and I think I was thinking this a minute ago. There's two issues of, you said perception, but it's also about actually conveying knowledge to the client at the beginning. Because when an agent goes out to meet a potential customer, they're going out to value the house, they say. It's a valuation. We now try and call it something else, but we talk all about our services, about how we're going to be wonderful and sell your house and how wonderful it is. And we ask the question, where do you want to move to? But we don't actually always explain the whole process from start to finish, because it's a bit boring and a bit long-winded. It's a bit technical without being, you know, overly technical. And so I think from the very beginning, the agent is not set up the client in the correct way.
100%.
And hence this, and you said the word when we were talking earlier off camera, the word just. We're just doing this, just doing that. And it isn't just, it's a big undertaking. But equally, I think probably, I don't know, this is completely just a guess, most lawyers don't sit down with their client at the beginning and explain to them enough about the process, the time length, what's going to happen, what could go wrong, what shouldn't go wrong, because they've got the customer signed up. Let's just go for it. And they don't want to talk about all the ins and outs of it. It's the same with estate agents. We don't want to talk about exactly how we're going to find you a buyer. I just want to say, yeah, we're on the internet, we're doing this, and that's not good enough, really. And that's a problem.
I was going to just ask, I was just going to say, you're absolutely right that the client isn't, well, not only is the agent maybe not interested as such or whatever, but the client isn't interested, and the lawyers don't invest the time. Now, that's a very, very important point, and it's actually a compliance requirement of lawyers to do what's called KYC, which is know your client. And knowing your client doesn't just mean giving them a thorough interrogation as to what they do for a living, how they've earned their money, what they're currently doing, whether they can afford it, you know, whether they trust the client or not, whether they feel that they're actually legitimate or not as a prospective buyer. If they're a cash buyer, where does the funds come from? You know, there's a lot of questions, and it is a very intrusive, thorough investigation that a lawyer has to undertake. Now, going back to your point earlier about preparing the client, it's not even just the conveyancing process that the clients need to be prepared for. It's the extremely invasive and intrusive ID verification, source of funds verification, source of wealth verification, all of these things that if you are introduced to the transaction 2-3 weeks down the road, you know, let's not forget that the client and the agent's time clock starts ticking from the minute they know that a buyer has agreed to buy a property, right? So you then fast forward the time so they find a lawyer that they're going to use, and they agree the fee and all the rest of it. The lawyer then starts asking them all sorts of questions like their inside leg measurement and what they had for dinner the previous evening, about where their money's coming from, how they've got it, are they getting a mortgage? And there's a whole host of questions that needs to be met in terms of compliance. Now, the lawyers should be undertaking what I call a first response call with every client, not only just to say thank you for instructing me, because it doesn't cost a lot and it actually goes a long way with a lot of people, but also to say, this is basically I understand this is what you're trying to undertake. Is that correct? There might be some complexities and issues with the title. Once I've had a look at the title and I can actually assess complexity-wise whether there's going to be any issues, I can obviously report to you on that. So it's a timing thing as well in terms of when people are introduced at what point, and also what their obligations and their responsibilities are, which then leads on to the second disconnect key point I thought, which was accountability of, the lawyer has to undertake this. Now, obviously, I'm not saying agents don't do any due diligence or anything at all, nothing like that at all. I know they do, they have to, because otherwise they're going to be in all sorts of trouble because, but I think it's important to understand that you're absolutely right, that it's the lack of the conveyancers explaining to the clients what's going to happen, what's likely to happen, having the time, patience, especially with a first-time buyer who doesn't know the first thing about buying a property. You're then at the mercy of the quality of the conveyancer, really, without being too blunt about it, as to how much patience they have, how much time they have, how experienced they are. If they're not experienced, how are they going to anticipate a potential problem? It's a bit like driving a car. You can pass a test and say you can drive a car, but if you've driven 10,000 miles, it's a very different experience that you're going to be able to explain to somebody compared to someone who's just passed their test that second, and they're all euphoric and they think that they're the best thing since sliced bread.
So true.
Monsters.
Yes.
But I think accountability is a very key element of the disconnect, and I felt I'd be interested to get your feedback on this, Paul and Silas, as well, in terms of what you feel that accountability is from both sides.
I think most people put solicitors into a very high level professional bracket of thinking, like doctors. Doctor knows best, the lawyer knows best, the accountant knows best, and they just have some sort of inbuilt immediate trust.
Yes. And
I'm not saying that's wrong, but it obviously proves not to be completely correct, because at the end of the day, lawyers, like everybody else, are just people, and we do all the same problems, and we have the same issues going on in our lives outside of our work, and people don't quite see that. The solution is, I think, more explanation and more teaching of people what's going to happen. And just going back to agents, I think that another problem is at the very beginning is when I meet somebody for the first time, it's a dalliance, a going on a dance. Are they going to sell their house or not? I'm here to value their house, but I want them to sign a contract today or the next few days, not in 6 months or a year, because you meet people and they go, I'm going to think I'll sell my house next year.
Yeah.
And so are you going to give that person all your complete attention? No, you can't spend an hour and a half, 2 hours with them. We can, but probably won't, because it's just initial meeting. And so that's half the problem, how much time and effort the agent puts in. And that's an accountability issue that we need to address as agents, I think.
Let me piggyback on that point, if I may, please, Paul, because this is what we attempted to build into the WiggyWam platform. And you mentioned government regulation earlier on in the conversation, Tina. I just want to emphasise that point as well, because I've been very frustrated and I've been pulled over the coals for criticism of the home buying and selling group, for example. And my view is that, you've got a whole group of people that have kicked around this idea of how do we speed up the housing process for the last 3 years. Some big names and some big identities in that room, but actually nothing's really moved forward. And we've gone through the hardest market over the course of the last 3 years, where conveyancers really needed help, but they couldn't get it. So a lot of them left the industry. Okay, they were stressed out of their eyeballs. And we've had estate agents go to the wall or face going to the wall because they couldn't get their pipeline income through in time. And so I've seen posts recently suggesting that the home buying and selling group are going to start to introduce a single source of truth, which sounds very much like 1984 as part of the process, and then they want to regulate the industry basically into a straitjacket. And I can't imagine that going down that route is going to help either estate agents or conveyancers, because the reason a lot of the conveyancing work takes so long is because of all the additional compliance that they're having to do, which I'm sure Urjan will back me up on. So for the estate agents to then have to go through all of that compliance again, first of all, they're salespeople, so I don't think many of them are going to want to take that on. Let's be frank. But secondly, where's the value? It's not a value. It's just saying you will do this or you'll be fined. Okay. Now, what we've tried to address within the platform of WiggyWam is to, and this is not to pitch WiggyWam here, but to make people aware that I take the point that Paul mentioned about educating the client. We've tried to do that through the platform. So estate agents and conveyancers can just say, go to WiggyWam, log into the learning center there. You can go through the training videos there that show you exactly what's going to happen through the process of moving home. Okay, it's all there. It might not be as in-depth as it probably could be if, an expert conveyancer of 30 years was to do it, but it's pretty much there. The same with preparing your seller's pack, which I think is fundamental for helping start to bridge this gap and this disconnect between conveyancers and estate agents. Is that seller's pack must be in place. Well, there's walkthrough videos of how to complete your forms, because, again, another delay in the process is solicitors get instructed, the client receives then a stack of paperwork through in the post, a bunch of files that says, fill out these forms, and if you get any information wrong, then you're going to jail. And I don't know a bigger incentive to procrastinate on why I wouldn't want to fill out those forms and send them back to the lawyer, So, so having that video walkthrough, over the shoulder video walkthrough, is again trying to remove work from the conveyancer, remove work from the estate agent, and say, okay, this is a resource that's incredibly valuable that will help to start to bridge this gap. And that's what we want to kind of build on and compound, because I think the reason why the home buying and selling group are failing so much is because they are trying to find a one-size-fits-all model for 26 million housing units in the UK, some of which are dating back to 1600, with all sorts of legal issues, title issues. It's nuts, right? Yeah. So to find a model that works for 80% of all deals, because properties have been bought and sold, they're registered on land registry, you'd like to think that titles are broadly in order, is the right way to free up the experienced conveyancers' time to tackle the 20% of deals that need a lot more headspace to actually work out how they can go through. And that's how I see things, but I could be wrong.
It would definitely make things a lot easier for everyone, though, wouldn't it? If it was, I love this idea of the seller's pack. I know the HIPs that came out and everyone went, oh no, because all the good stuff was taken out of it, from what I can remember.
It all comes back to sharing information, where the people buying and selling the house need to be informed in the first place of what's going to happen, what they need to do,
prepare them.
The state, and it's down to the estate agent and the solicitor, either or, to make sure that they know. Otherwise, when they come back, like,
you could do that with a simple checklist, couldn't you?
Estate.
Sorry, Dan.
No worries. So there's estate agents chasing solicitors waiting on buyers and sellers kind of unsure about what to do because they're waiting on.
And the buyers and sellers chase both of you. If I remember rightly, the buyers and sellers chase both the conveyancers if they get the number and the estate agent. So can you imagine how much time is wasted all the time with all these calls? And like the estate agent then gets chased by the buyer or seller, who then chases the conveyancer.
That's why I like the
How much wasted time is that? We all know that time's important. We're doing so much out, so many hours a day.
That's why I like the point Silas raised of having videos where, either you could make your own videos to explain, the process, what forms this buyer or this seller will fill out for the exchange of contracts, and so that's available to them. So, because I don't imagine every time you get a new person buying a house, a new person selling a house, you don't want to explain the entire process. Okay, yes, it's in your best interest to, but that's a lot of time.
It's a lot of time.
You've got to introduce someone to the entire process of conveyancing every time you meet someone new who doesn't know about it.
I like the
How
idea
much
of
time is
checklists.
that?
I was going to say the other issue is that it's like Silas alluded to as well. There is no one size fits all with regards to any conveyancing transaction, because let's not kid ourselves that it's only the title complexities that's the issue here. The issue is actually client circumstances and outside third party involvement. They are the two other key biggest factors of delays in any transaction, because if you exclude technical issues, which unless it's something like a really defective lease or there's some real issue with the title that is just irreparable, or there's some sort of structural issue with the property that is a danger or something along those lines, like there is currently with the Building Safety Act, there's all sorts of paranoia because nobody wants to make a decision. No one wants to advise on anything in case they miss something. So you've got this whole mass hysteria at the moment with the Building Safety Act, which is pretty much making every single leasehold property the biggest hot potato of all time.
Yeah.
That no one wants to even touch with a barge pole, let alone advise on it and try and make fees on it or anything. So you've got, aside from the technical issue, which most of the time there are solutions available with regards to indemnity policies or retrospective obtaining consents and certificates. But apart from indemnity policy, which is probably the quickest of all the solutions to implement, it isn't always the best solution. It is effectively, to coin an analogy, it's a band-aid on the problem rather than some sort of cure or stitching it or whatever it is properly to do it properly. But you've got, aside from the technical, you've got, the client is desperate to move because they're changing jobs, they're relocating, they're getting divorced, they're doing something, or there's a probate, or there's something's happened in that client's life that is dictating the pace and the urgency of that transaction for them. So forget the agents and the lawyers for a minute. The client is number one cheerleader of leading the whole emphasis of how quickly they want this done. So if you put an investor into that, especially an investor that's got a big portfolio of properties that has just been absolutely butchered by the interest rate rise and can't afford to pay all of the rents on all of the properties, which he's now going to have to do because he can't pay his tenants or his tenants are not paying him and all the rest of it, that's going to lead to a very unreasonable, anxious, pushy client. Now, if you had an agent who wants to help but can't really help, with all due respect to them in terms of doing the process, that's then two people that are going to be onto the lawyer straight away. So then the lawyer's perception is, everyone's beating me up here. I'm trying to just do my job, but I've got 50 people screaming at me. And if they all left me alone, I'd do the work. That's the one thing the lawyers always say. So if they just left me to do it, I'd do it. But I'm too busy taking phone calls and giving people updates and telling them what's happened and trying to be on top of it and being proactive, which all lawyers want to be, but very few of them are able to be because of that expectation and the demand for communication, the demand for updates, the instantaneous nature of emails, which has completely revolutionized the conveyancing process anyway, because emails have replaced letters, or supposedly, but if they are letters, then they get posted and you wait 2-3 days and then you respond and then another 2-3 days and whatever. No. Email is instant, like a WhatsApp message. It's instantaneous. You expect an answer immediately, and it is not a letter, it is a conversation.
And the other thing is people tend to send more and more and more and more, because as soon as you answer, they send another 3.
Of course.
Which makes
the best bit is they always say, sorry to bother you. I know you're busy.
Excuse me.
But...
Yes. You should say, I only communicate via letter this day, Royal Mail only.
But again, going back to perception management and expectation management, which was a key point that Silas raised as well at the very outset, and I 100% champion for this. If you raise the issue of how a client wants to be communicated with at the outset in your first response call, you're not going to have a situation where the client is ringing you at stupid hours and asking for updates on an unreasonable frequency. Because if you took the time to realise that your client is a doctor, is a teacher, is a surgeon, is a whatever, and is not available between 9 and 5, what benefit is it to the practitioner to try and reach them between 9 and 5 to get instructions? It's not going to happen. So they have to be aware of that, and they have to account for that. And if you do take that extra time to manage their expectation at the outset and ask the question about how they'd like to even be communicated with and on what terms and what time and what frequency, you've already cemented that relationship of trust and confidence in somebody. And if you don't take the 2 seconds it takes in that first response call to even ask them, look, how often would you like to have an update? Would you like it when there's something to tell you? Would you like it just for the sake of, hi, how you doing? As a first-time buyer, they're going to take you up on that because they want guidance, they want support. An investor's not interested in you had dinner last night, where you went and how busy or how tired you are. When are we exchanging contracts? That is the magic question.
Isn't WiggyWam there for actually? Sorry.
Yeah. Can I take that one step further, Ercan? What if, as you're working on all of your deals at the moment, every time you complete one part of your deal, everyone else gets notified that it's been completed, so you don't have to contact them at all?
Yeah, how about
they've been notified the fact that you've done your job and you're moving towards the completion, but in fact, they haven't had to call you or interrupt any of the work that you're doing.
They just get a notification.
What difference would that make to your day?
It would make a massive difference provided everyone had confidence and faith in it. Unfortunately, we are, whether we like it or not, even with AI involvement or not, we are still very much needy as a species of needing that human interaction and contact and reassurance. Because if I just get a text message saying you've exchanged, for instance, what does that actually mean? Unless someone's taken the time to explain to me what actually exchange means and had that human interaction or video or whatever training and support beforehand, that's going to more likely raise more questions than it's going to satisfy as an answer.
Okay, sorry to interrupt, but you've already got these trainings in place. Can you imagine it's coming up to it, you know it's about to happen. Ercan, you literally press the button to send the training about what completion means. That gets sent, and then you send either a voice message or a little tiny video, maybe that goes across the platform. I don't know if this is up for this, that says, hey guys, guess what? You know that training I just sent to you? This has just happened now. Got any more questions at all, feel free to send me a little voice message or a little video back if you want that. Or you could just leave it at that if you want to, but you give them the choice. But you can make that so quick, and then they feel like they're spoken to you.
I mean, that's exactly how we've kind of built the platform to work. But it was interesting having this conversation with Ercan yesterday and understanding the amount of superfluous phone calls that happen either between agent and solicitor, or between solicitor and client, or between solicitors in the same chain. And as you can have instructions from a client in the morning that says, yes, I want you to exchange contracts, and they will still ring and double check a few hours later to make sure, am I absolutely okay to exchange contracts? Because if they do it and then the client changes their mind, they're dead in the water.
Yeah, of course.
Right. And there was a statistic going around that suggested that there was something like each conveyancer receives 6 or 7 phone calls per week per case file, and the average conveyancer is dealing with 70 case files.
Let's do the maths that quick. How many maths?
I think it's 420 phone calls before you've even done any work, which is mad. And that's again another reason why we put this platform in place, that you tick a box, everybody's updated. Because I take the point you mentioned earlier, Ercan, when we have to understand that something is trustworthy. And I couldn't tell you how many conversations I've had with a solicitor that says, yes, I've sent that letter, contract pack, whatever, email to the other side, and you ring the other side 5 minutes later and they go, I haven't got anything.
Yeah.
Who's telling me the truth here? Do you know what I mean? At least if I've got something timed and date stamped from you that goes, okay, well, on 24th of July, you told me at 3:05 p.m. that you sent that letter.
Emails are being used as evidence now, literally, and that's why I think a lot of people, as much of a pain as they can be, they are actually a really, really useful, quick communication tool. If they're used correctly by the right people for the right reasons, and they don't take liberties and make things urgent when they're not urgent and all the rest of it, like anything in life, if you're disciplined with it and everyone is responsible with it, then it can be a really, really powerful, quick, easy tool. The process that Silas was alluding to earlier was the whole release of contracts when there is a large chain involved, which I'm sure everybody's come across at some point or another. And I was kind of going into a bit of detail about, what actually happens when a release is required. What does it even mean, and why does that then have an impact on whether a chain of 6 transactions actually exchanges on the day and fixes the day for completion that they're trying to achieve? And if they don't, what are the impacts of that, which are things like where you start hearing about simultaneous exchanges and completions rather than an exchange with a completion date at a later date. And there's, for another episode, I'm sure, a whole plethora of reasons for that. And it would be quite interesting to sort of, I'm happy to divulge that and explain what it is from a practitioner's perspective and what's involved and what things that they're thinking about, which then might be quite enlightening to those that are on the other end of that, either the clients or even the agents, to think, well, how hard can it be to pick up the phone and just talk to each other and do the exchange? I mean, that's what we've been working for the last 3 months. Why would you waste a day doing it because you're on the phone or you're out of the office or whatever it is? And then the whole trust and that relationship can break down so quickly and so easily when all that work has been done in trying to actually build that in the first place.
I feel like trying to interrupt you, Paul. I just want to say, I feel like we brought Paul on as the ideal example in Scotland that everyone should focus on. I just interrupt you. Carry on.
Well, I was just going to say, this is a lot of it's down to human nature, of course. But I think that's the core problem, is when money is involved, big money is involved, and human nature collide. There's always this kind of not sure about things, not saying distrust, but just,
uncertainty,
hoping things. Yes. And people sometimes say to me, I'm going to buy another house first before I sell my house. And I point out that they need the money first to sell their own house. But then they don't trust the process because they could be homeless. And that's just an example I'm giving to give you an idea of the problem, I think. I think Silas has a really, really good solution, and this is not meant to be a sales call in any way, shape or form. I think Silas should just actually tell us a bit about his platform, what it does, to wrap this up a little bit.
Yeah, I think it would.
Please, Silas.
When I first heard it, I thought, I wish I knew about it last year when I was selling on my houses. Well, trying to.
Thank you. I will, by all means, outline the platform. There's one final disconnect which I think is really important to kind of bring this all to a conclusion, is that there's a disconnect, I think, between estate agents and conveyancers in the value of the service that they bring to the client. Okay, and that's a huge disconnect, because every single person I've spoken to who has moved house in the last 3 years, I said, did you enjoy the process? First of all, no, it was hell, blah, 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 this problem, that problem, blah, blah, blah. Okay, if you could pay another £500, another £1,000 to get rid of all those problems, would you pay it? Yeah, of course I would. Pay away the pain, because they don't want to be dealing with all of this. And this is where the reason I raise that disconnect is because a lot of, and I will point this more at conveyancers rather than estate agents, but a lot of conveyancers are competing on very, very low fees, or they're squeezing margins completely, and they're not having the revenue to invest then in technology and the right staff and the right support staff as well. Because again, you can be a mustard conveyancer and just hate talking to people on the phone, and I get it. So put a BDM or a salesperson in place in your business to then update the client. That's exactly how I would do it if I was running a law firm. And that's exactly the model that I wanted to bring to the table, is have a client-facing agent that might work with 3 or 4 conveyancers in the office and use that person as the go-between between the client, and update everybody, and then the conveyancers can just get on and do their work. Makes sense. But anyway, so the way we've built this platform centers around really about as we talked about earlier, the education piece of client, which is most important, because one of the things I raised yesterday is that there's, again, this disconnect, which is a common theme of the agent and the conveyancer being very immune to the process and the stresses and the strains that the client goes through when they're trying to move house, because they deal with it every day, right? So it's just like, oh, the client's distressed, I'll calm them down, and then we'll put a plan in action in place. Well, why not cut that off right at the very start? And as you say, Paul, when you're onboarding a client initially, you don't have to do it necessarily on the valuation, but once you've won the instruction, sit down with them when you're doing the take on and say, okay, this is the process that you're going to go through. We will guide you through every step of the way. And by the way, we've got this platform here, WiggyWam, where you can go and learn all about what you're going to have to go through, because that client might not have moved home in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
They might not have a clue about what they're doing. Okay, you know, you can pick up a book and read a book about the home buying and selling process and what the pitfalls are and how to avoid them. So we're big on that education piece, which is so important. The second part is what we call the workspaces, and this is really key for agents, conveyancers, and their clients, because that is effectively like a project management workspace. All of the different tasks laid out for buyer, seller, estate agent, conveyancers, and it's literally a tick box exercise. You tick something off, everybody's updated in real time.
Gosh, how much time that's going to save people.
Well, you know, from my experience, and I say this from being an estate agent and also being in the property world, I don't necessarily need to know. I don't need a 10-minute phone call that says, oh, we've got the searches back and there's this and there's this. Okay, you got the searches back, great. What's next? Right? And I think for most people, they don't necessarily need all of that, but they do need to know that something's happening, because it's when the solicitors are instructed and they put money on account, the client puts money on account, and then they don't hear anything for 3 weeks. Well, what just happened? Am I being ignored? Is the deal still on? Is the buyer still interested? Have they changed their mind? I'm going to lose the house that I want. Heightened anxiety. Guess who gets that in the neck? Yeah, agent and solicitor all the time. So that project management workspace keeps everybody updated in real time, and it avoids this problem of you ring, you know, you're acting for a couple, you ring Mr., have a conversation with him. Okay, great. Yeah, fine. We know where we are. He goes home and talks to Mrs. in the evening. Well, what about so-and-so? Oh, we didn't cover that. Back on the phone in the morning. Okay, well, let's just have let's put us all on the same hymn sheet, as you know, as the old saying goes, and let's all have that same frame of reference of what we're working towards and how far away from the deal and what are my responsibilities to get done. Because I'll be honest, I've bought and sold a lot of properties, but when a solicitor sends me a stack of files like that and then says, by the way, we need your ID, and they've literally 2 weeks ago just sold a property for me, but they still need my ID, and okay, so I've got to get in my car, I've got to go and see them because they don't do biometric ID, and I've got to fit that into my busy workday. You can see all these problems starting to concertina. So it's about getting those issues done and dealt with, because again, I'm sure, Paul, you've had this situation, Erjan, you've probably had the same. You know, you get to 5 minutes before exchange and then somebody in the chain goes, do you know what, I haven't ID'd my client. Back we go. All right, we'll start this all over again. And Erjan, just touch on this point that you mentioned yesterday about, because this is something that I blew my mind when I learned it, about the expiry of mortgage products, not mortgage offers, which was really enlightening for me yesterday.
Yeah, so basically, when obviously you're buying and you firstly obviously need to be on the lenders panel, which is again another factor in deciding which law firm to actually appoint, because if you're not on that panel, you're not going to be able to undertake the work for that lender anyway, because you are on what's called a joint retainer, so you are acting for both anyway. But when the offer does come through, the clients very seldom are reminded of the very short expiry of that particular product. So they would have arranged for a valuation, depending on what they want, or if the lender just dictates that, they would have paid presumably a product fee or elected to pay a product fee. And they would then obviously wait for their lawyer to tell them that they've satisfied all the conditions. Now, in that offer is an expiry of when that offer is going to expire. Now, in the old days, it used to be the mortgage offer was valid for, say, 6 months, generally speaking, in the main, and the product that secures the rate was only valid for about 3 months. Okay. That has drastically changed to like less than about a month now with certain types of lending, because if you think about the sort of very volatile nature of interest rates and things like that, the lenders are reluctant to leave themselves exposed to certain types of products, because obviously it's at a competitive rate. Now, obviously, when interest rates went up, all of a sudden, lenders are going to lose a lot of money if someone was going to come along and try and tie up a 5-year fixed rate on a very, very low percentage. So very seldom, unfortunately, do lawyers and or clients even look at, well, when my product's going to expire. Now, if I'm buying a leasehold property with a mortgage, there's a very good chance that you're going to go past 4 weeks from the date that mortgage offer is issued. Now, what does that mean? That means you're going to either apply to extend your mortgage, if you're lucky, and the lender agrees to it, which you have to tick certain criteria of meeting that, which is usually you can only apply for it within the last 2 weeks of that offer with certain lenders. Some might not even do it at all.
So some don't do it anymore.
And you basically have to go back to square one. So then what does that do? That adds another layer of paranoia and fear that the client's going to not only be able to not afford the mortgage, they're going to run out of time before they exchange contracts. So the whole deal's going to collapse. And that's what's actually going on at the moment, which is why so many deals, especially if they're leasehold, it's not just the Building Safety Act, it's actually the mortgage rates and it's people's affordability and the loan to value that they secure at the outset. So, you know, without tiptoeing into FSA territories of explaining whys and wherefores of loan to value and how they calculate all of that, that is just bottom line what is the reality. And if you're not hot on that, the client is going to be on the phone to you, badgering you, saying, well, why don't you tell me? Or, you know, my product's expired. Sometimes they'll know if the brokers are good and they'll give them the heads up, say, look, you know, when you're exchanging, because you've got to get this product's going to run out. And unfortunately, more often than not, it will run out. They won't be successful in applying for it to be extended. And they'll have to go back to square one and pay another £1,000 arrangement fee or product fee, or another £300, £400 valuation fee, or whatever it is. So you add that to a very tight budget of what these guys have got, especially for first-time buyers and the rest of it. They're likely to be having a very high loan-to-value percentage and borrowing a significant percentage of the property value. Then they haven't got loads of disposable income to throw at extra arrangement fees and product fees and valuation fees. So yeah, it's scary to be honest.
I had no idea that was going on right now. That's changed. That must change. I mean, you think about a chain or something. Anyway,
to be honest, that could be a subject of an entire new live.
Let's put that together.